Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK. Home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development programme, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the program with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Get set for the year ahead with the Bloomsbury Education Back to School sale. Save 30% on all Bloomsbury education books until 30th September. From the very best in research-led practice to trusted advice on inclusivity, behaviour and curriculum design, we've got something for everyone. Visit bloomsbury.com/B2S sale to shop now and save 30%. Bloomsbury Education, books for every step of your teaching journey.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio for the Late Show. I'm back again after a 2-week hiatus, and it's really good to be back and to be able to talk about a topic tonight with a few brilliant teacher guests who I will introduce in a little while. It's really good to be back. We're going to be talking tonight about moving schools, essentially, and moving schools a lot, or, as it might be, hardly ever moving schools. And I thought I'd start by really painting that picture of, 50 years ago, where people would start out on their teaching career, and really the idea of a one-school teacher was pretty common. It was pretty common for someone to stay in a school for 25, 30, 35, even 40 years in the same place. And actually, that was seen, and this is interesting, isn't it, when we move on, which we will do in this discussion, to move on to perceptions of change and moving. Because 50 years ago, those teachers who stayed in a school for the 30 years, the 40 years, were they seen in a positive, negative, or neutral light for that? I still think, and then I spoke to my dad about this. My dad was a one-school teacher. That's a lie, a two-school teacher, if you consider, I think he did 1 or 2 years at the very start of his career in one school, and then he changed to this second school, and in his second school, he stayed there for 35 years, right, as a history teacher, then head of history. And he said to me that, I remember him saying to me in my career, "Oh, you've been there for a while, and maybe if you want to progress, you should look to change schools or get a promotion or whatever." That sort of pressure to change. I think back in the day, and I'm putting back in the day in inverted commas because I don't necessarily know exactly when I'm talking about, maybe 50 years ago sort of thing. I just wonder whether that idea of being a career teacher in one school, it was seen in a positive way. I mean, I'm not saying it's not seen in a positive way now at all, but it certainly wasn't seen in a negative way. Whereas I do feel in the last 10, 20, 30 years, as the pace of life has just sped up to such an extent, it's now seen as, oh, that's pretty static, that person has stayed there for X amount of time. It must mean X, Y, Z. And when we think about all the different professional development opportunities there are now and all the different things you can do and go to and all the rest of it, people sort of just going along, getting the job done, but not really sort of doing anything outside the box. I wonder whether the expectations have changed inside the profession about what's actually expected of people. Actually, it might just be careers in general. It might not just be teaching, to be fair. But I certainly think there's been that shift in teaching of, you know, if a person stayed somewhere for too long, what are they doing? Which we'll discuss tonight. And let me just really quickly share with you who I'm going to be talking to tonight. I'm really excited about actually the guests that I'm going to be talking about. I've got Mike Watson on. Mike has taught in 7 schools in 25 years. So I wouldn't necessarily call Mike a nomad teacher, but I would call. Hello, Mike. I can hear you. You're clicking, and it sounds like you're in I don't know what. Are you there?
I am here. Yes, thanks, Tom. Yeah,
Oh,
I am.
good evening to you. I was just interested, and please correct me. I said 7 schools in 25 years. Would that be?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. For varying degrees of length of time. Yeah.
Well, just before I finish my introduction, or you can introduce yourself. Before we do that, can you run through the number of years in each school, if you can, that you spent?
I can, and I had to genuinely think about this before I
Yeah.
he's going to ask me this. I better get this right. So yeah, this is my 25th year of teaching now as a primary school teacher. I did 2 years in my first school, so as an NQT, and the second year, and then that was kind of, at that time, that was sort of seen as how long you did in your first school. Not universally, but that was sort of you'd done your first year where you realised you didn't actually know anything about teaching whatsoever, and then you had a go at it where you sort of knew something. So I moved after 2 years to a slightly smaller school, but a very, very different kind of school. So from quite a rural school to the closest you can get to an inner city school in Lincolnshire. School with sort of a range of challenges, and I was there for 7 years, and moved up through the school quite well. So I started just as a class teacher, ended up as acting deputy head, went through the interview process, didn't get the job, and decided, well, then it's probably the time to move on. At this point,
Yeah.
let the people who've come in new do the job. They don't need the person that sort of did it a bit and wanted it a bit, milling around and feeling miserable about it, I guess. So went off then to do first of all some long-term supply, and then into about a year and a half contract at another school.
Was
Did
that?
quite well there.
I'm interested at that point because you've gone from the deputy head thing, which you say you didn't get, and then you've gone supply, and then maybe this other contract. So at that time, did you feel that was like a tough time, or were you choosing to do that?
No, it was pretty much a choice. It was pretty much a choice to do it. It was quite a nice change of pace. It's all in one school, as I say, going on supply. It wasn't supply in lots of different schools. It was a maternity cover supply contract that led into a further year. So I did that in a sort of very different area. So I was in a different place, and then when that contract came to an end, actually went straight back into leadership. So then I took on a head of school role in a federation of 2 really, really small schools. So I was head of school at one school that had, I think, 42 pupils on roll. And then that was federated with another school nearby that had just over 70 on roll, and I was head of school at one and senior leader across both. Did that job, was head of school across for one school 1 year, then the other school the next year, and for I think 2-3 years beyond that. And then, as unfortunately happens with schools that are that size, the smaller of the two schools, the numbers dropped down to 26, and
Right.
sadly it closed because
Ah.
it was too small to sustain. And while it was really hard and it felt quite challenging, at the same time, none of the children at the school actually came from the village that the school was in. So there really was no justification, I suppose, in the end for that school to exist on such small numbers. So it was sad, but at the end of the day, it was just the way that things were. So with losing a school, jobs get lost. So I took the opportunity to leave at that point. Did another couple of sort of short-term roles in schools. So they were sort of the sixth school, if you like, that I did various bits and pieces for, and then into the current role that I'm in, where I've now been for, I think this is my 8th year in the current school that I've been in, as a class teacher, and then as a senior leader now for the last 6 years or so. So wow. I've done pretty much everything one way or another, from class teacher through to head teacher and head of school and back again. It's been a range of things that I've done, certainly.
Fair play to you, because that is a real sort of, like you said, you've covered everything. I mean, was there ever a point? I mean, we'll come back to this. I've got loads I want to ask you, loads of questions about it all. But I mean, more general questions too. But before we do that, I'll also just check Chris is there. Chris, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can, as long as you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear. Chris is my other guest, just to give everybody a little rundown on Chris's career. School 1, 10 years. School 2, 10 years. School 3, 5 years. School 4, 2 years. School 5, 1 year, 7 months. School 6, 1 year, 6 months. Chris, it sounds like you've got a Tom Rogers career here, because it just seems like you're going less and less and less time in each school. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully I'm about to buck that trend, because I'm about to go past school 5 imminently, I think, is what's about to happen. But yeah, effectively, when I started teaching '94, the first 2 schools I did 10 years in each, and I wasn't much of a mover. I was a head of year. I went into SLT in the second school. And in the third school, where I was for 5 years, I was an SLT there as well. And that was a great time. That third school was fantastic. But unfortunately, as you've probably heard many times from many different people, it was an Ofsted inspection that took all that apart realistically. And the head teacher was chucked under a bus. I was part of an SLT team that was still there, but I felt that it wasn't a great place to carry on. So I moved on from there, and since then I haven't really settled. And maybe it's only in my last school where I'm at currently, where I feel settled realistically, and I've done all sorts in between. A bit like Mike, I didn't do supply. I considered supply at one point, but I managed to pick up a job. I've taught all sorts of strange stuff, considering where I started, but that's effectively where I am now. And now I'm kind of back to, I'm not an SLT, and I'm not sure that I ever want to be there again from that experience, but I can't say never. That's all.
You sound more and more like me, Chris. Yeah, no, I mean, that's really nice just to hear that overview from both of you of where you're at. It would also be good just to ask, and obviously we've got lots of listeners, if anybody wants to join in with the conversation at any point tonight, then obviously feel free to do so. You can tweet us in the bottom right hand corner. There's a little speech bubble there. You can tap that and tweet anything you want, or if you even want to speak, you can do that by hitting the microphone in the bottom left later on in the show. It would also be nice for me to just mention our 2 sponsors this evening. We've got John Catt Educational. John Catt Educational, if you haven't heard of them, they're publishers of books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools. And you can visit johncatbookshop.com and you can benefit from 20% off any book at the John Cat Bookshop by using the code JCTTR2425. That's JCTTR2425, and you can get 20% off any number of books on the John Cat website. And our other sponsor tonight is Reading Solutions UK. If you haven't heard of them, they're very prominent in primary and secondary schools. They're the home of Dreambox Reading Plus, which is an online reading development program. I've tried the program. It is really, really good. I tried it for 30 days just to see what it's all about. It's very evidence-based. They have lots of adaptive technology in there, and it really supports and accelerates and helps students to improve their reading and develop their reading, essentially. And you can actually get a 4-week free trial like I did by searching Reading Solutions UK and going to their website and just requesting a free pilot. So yeah, there are our two sponsors tonight. Thank you very much, John Cat and Reading Solutions UK. So Mike, I'll start with you, and Chris, feel free to butt in on this if you want as well. When you've moved, Mike, between schools, and you can be as specific or general as you like here, what has motivated you to move from one teaching job to another, and what process do you go through when determining whether to make that change or that transition?
That's a really good question. I think the easiest one would probably be that first one, that move from my first job to my second, in that, having done the 2 years where I was, there was a change, similar to what Chris has said, there was a change of leadership. And I found myself in a position where, even though I was still relatively new, I didn't find that I wholly agreed with the new approach. This is not that I thought it was wrong, it just didn't necessarily sit with what I felt was my sort of method of teaching, or the way that the people that had taught me around me in the school had taught. And I just thought, this is actually 2 years into my career. I'm still quite new, little bit of experience. I'm probably quite employable at this point, and it was just that opportunity to think, right, okay, well, let's have a look, let's see what's around, what posts are coming up. And one came up at the school that I moved to, where I just thought, this is a school that's different. It was a little bit closer to home, so there was a little bit of a personal motivation in terms of travel, which helped. And it was a school that I was aware of, in that I'd done some little bits when I was training in that school as well, so I was aware of the school and how it worked and what was going on there. So I took the opportunity to go and see what they were looking for, and I applied for the post there, and it turned out that they were particularly looking for somebody who'd done some of the subjects that I'd specialised, for want of a better wording, in my training. That was somebody that they were looking for, and yeah, I seemed to be a good fit for them. So I think it's the sort of advice you'd give anybody really that's sort of looking for jobs, is don't necessarily jump into something, have a think about what's out there and what you want. Other times, it's just been necessity. When a school closes and your job is on the list of people that aren't going to have a job very soon, it's, oh crumbs, what am I going to do? So yeah, that's where I took the opportunity. I thought, actually, do you know what? I've done some quite intensive stuff here. Both schools were in difficult circumstances, second, third RI judgments. There was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of challenge that was being pushed into that school through Ofsted and local authority. And I think it was actually, this is a good opportunity to not so much take a break from teaching, but actually step back a little bit, keep doing the thing that I enjoy doing it. But if you go on to supply, you've got a little bit more choice, you've got a little bit more freedom, you've got a little bit of opportunity to think about what your working pattern looks like. And it was a good time for me at that time to take that slightly more flexible option, I suppose. I was fortunate in that respect. But yeah, those are my motivations, I guess, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's a mixture, isn't it? I was
Yeah.
just going to ask you, out of the 7 schools you worked in, obviously don't name any, but if you had to rank those 7 schools in your head now in terms of how enjoyable or unenjoyable they were for you, and
Mm.
you were to choose the school out of the 7 where you thought that was the worst one. It was the worst. I'm not saying it was the worst school, but it was the worst
The
one for
worst one
me.
for me personally, yeah, as in
Yeah,
the
for
experience
you.
as
Yeah,
a
exactly. Like,
yeah.
but to be fair, if I don't want to sort of praise you too much here, Mike, but if you've worked in a lot of schools, if you'd only worked in one, okay, this might be a different sort of context question, but the fact you've obviously forged a relevant amount of success in 7 schools, you've done all the different roles, okay. So if someone like you is saying, well, this was the least enjoyable school out of the 7, I think that's, normally you might go, well, it might have just been me and everyone else was super happy. But I think in your context, I think you would listen to that a bit more, don't you think? I think you would
Yeah.
listen to that and go, well, hang on a minute, if he's saying that, there's probably something in that. So what I was going to ask you was, out of the 7, thinking of, say, the 1 or 2 least enjoyable ones out of those 7, is there anything you could have picked up on before? Basically, I suppose what I'm asking is, do you regret moving to one of those from where you were? And, what were the consequences of that?
I think it's easy sometimes to look back and think somewhere was really unenjoyable because of something specific. So I think realistically, if I'm really honest and truthful, I think I've enjoyed working everywhere I've worked. I'm not just trying to be all PC, but certain jobs have ended or come to an end in ways that have been quite uncomfortable and unsettling. So rather than having a job that or a school that I don't think I liked or was the worst in inverted commas school, some of the roles that were in schools where I was in leadership positions and there was a huge amount of challenge, I think were difficult for that reason. They
Yeah.
were enjoyable to work in, but the amount of pressure externally that was coming in made some of those jobs really difficult to want to keep getting up and taking the punches every single day.
Yeah, right. So that's not,
So
but that's less to do with the school, though, isn't it?
it is,
So you're,
but
so,
I think I've enjoyed everywhere that I've worked at, and I'm
well,
not
that's what
just
I was
trying to
about to
dodge the
ask. It
question.
sounds like you've been pretty lucky. It sounds like you've.
Well, in many ways, I think I have. I've had, like I say, I've had some situations where things have changed within a school or within the organisation of a school that have made the school become uncomfortable and challenging. But I
Yeah.
think it's never been the school that's been the issue. There's been times when there have been people that have come in with perhaps a poor attitude or a misguided attitude from a personal perspective, where you didn't need to come in and treat people like this. Everybody was happy and would have gone with you, and we would have done all the things you'd have asked for if you'd have just treated us with a little bit more respect.
You see.
I remember one head teacher coming into a school new, and within 18 months, every single member of teaching and teaching assistant staff left.
Wow.
And that
Every
included
single
2
one.
teachers that they'd appointed.
Every single one.
Every
No.
single teacher. It was a single form entry. And yeah, in the time between them coming in as an acting head and then becoming the substantive head, over a period of a year and a half, 7 teachers left, and about 6 to 8 teaching assistants left, including 2 teachers that they'd appointed. They left within a term because the way that they managed was just so vicious, for want of a better word, that it felt
I can
massively
concur.
unnecessary.
Yeah,
I
please
can
go on,
concur with
Chris. Go on.
what Mike is saying here is true. Often it's and I feel bad. Leadership bashing is very easy to do, but I've been part of leadership, and
Same, yeah.
I know how that works, and I feel bad sometimes for saying it, but it can be toxic just as well as it can be fantastic. So yeah,
Yeah.
in my experiences of the schools that I worked in, often it might be I don't know how to put it, a misguided leader at the top that led to my decisions to move. I've now had enough time to consider things I've done in my past, and I totally regret one of my moves. I absolutely totally regret. I was very settled there. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Um, but it was one of those, and this is one thing I'd say to people who are considering moving. Often the grass does seem greener, and I thought, well, do you know what? I need to get out. And this was the one
Yeah.
the big one with the the bad Ofsted experience,
Yeah.
and I just felt like I had to go. And there was a restructure, and there was redundancy and all sorts of stuff. But I just thought, you know what? I've got to go, and I'll be fine. I thought I'll be fine. And then, like you say, since then it's been 2 years, 1 year, 1 year. So it's not been the smartest thing I ever did, but I did it, and I'm big enough to just accept it, and I've just got to get on and carry on. But yeah, largely in my experience, it's been an individual rather than groups who maybe I've thought, you know what, this isn't the place for me.
I mean, just to throw in my sort of experiences in here as well, I've probably done that twice. I've done the sort of, I'm feeling a little bit restless here, even though I wasn't. I was actually feeling settled, and I translated that as restless. And I definitely did the whole grass is greener thing. I definitely did a bit of the, well, I've been here for a bit now, and there's not a lot happening, even though there was a lot happening. It's just I chose not to see it. I definitely went into just a mode of thinking of needing to change, and and actually sort of ties in with my personality probably as well. Anyway, in the sense of I do get sort of restless anyway in a general sense. So maybe that's part of it. But anyway, to cut a long story short, those two times I did that didn't end well. I did that twice, and on both occasions, those two schools that I changed to were probably the worst two that I've worked in out of all the ones I've done. And I haven't actually worked this out and written it down, but I reckon I've done, and not including supply, like day-to-day supply or anything like that, I reckon I must have done like at least 10 schools now. And those two schools were the worst two that I changed into when I didn't have to. And again, just to sort of reflect back what you guys were saying, one of them was probably about promotion. And, that was silly because I could have just got promoted. I didn't need to do that. It was just, I just got it into my head that I needed to do it. I really didn't need to. And the other one was partly promotion. Again, oh God, I just hate the word promotion. And secondly, also just that feeling of looking at the weaknesses of where you currently are rather than the strengths. And for whatever reason, the longer I'm at a place, the more I look at the weaknesses than the strengths. I think that's a natural human thing to do.
I think it's a teacher thing as well, isn't it? We're great at knowing what we're not doing well, and being told what we're doing well really hard to accept. So I think it's a natural mirror, isn't it, to look and see what the issues are rather than recognizing the problems. I think that's where, like you said about feeling comfortable. Oh, I'm comfortable, so I need to change. Actually,
Correct.
You're comfortable. You're probably doing your best work at this point.
Correct.
Because you get it, you've got all the processes in place. You're not having to think about how to do it, where to do it, when to do it, in what style to do it. It's now just all there. It's in your practice. You're probably delivering the best lessons and getting the best outcomes that you've got with any children that you've had. And all of a sudden you think, oh, I'm too comfortable. Or they're comfortable. No, 100%. You're not. You're probably now just in the right place doing the right thing. That's what I've learned, particularly where I am now. This is now the place I've been the longest, and I have no intention of moving. I feel comfortable, but I also kind of know I'm doing it well.
Also, when you move around a little bit, so I found, having had my first three schools were 10, 10, 5. Then what I reckon, and see if you agree, anyone or either of you two, is I think it takes 2 years to feel like you even are accepted by the pupils of a school or some of the parents. Because I've obviously been senior at times, and when I moved from the first couple of schools, I would turn up at a new school and I forgot, I couldn't believe I wasn't established, and then people wouldn't do what I was telling them to do. And it's quite a strange thing. And if I look at the numbers in my last three schools, I really haven't been established, except for the one where I'm currently in, which is, I think the roots have just got in the ground, and I realise I need to stick around rather than flitting off as I have done for a couple of times. But I find at least 2 years, and I think before you can make a proper difference as a leader, maybe 5 years at least, personally. But I mean, I saw a thing years ago. I think it was done Harvard Business School or something like that. The different types of leaders, the architect. I forget the one that destroys. There was one that comes in, and I've seen these people. I've seen these people at the school when I left through the turbulence. Someone went in, did 3 years, raised everything up through pretty harsh actions, and has disappeared, and it's now dipping to a degree. So it needs a lot of time. It always needs a lot of time.
That's the thing, and yeah, totally. And the funny thing is, in one of those schools I was talking about that I left, I was looking at it going, I was saying before about focusing more on the weaknesses than the strengths, and also focusing on weaknesses that were they were barely weaknesses. Like, there's not enough professional development, right? I genuinely remember sitting there going, oh, there's a bit of a lack of sort of professional development zeal knocking around. And you know what? In some ways that was true. But when you move from somewhere like that to somewhere that's utterly terrible, you realize, what the hell was I thinking? Like, you can make your own professional development opportunities using social media. You can do whatever, right? And I was seeing that as, it's almost like I was just looking for faults. And listen, I mean, I'm making this school sound like a sort of like utopia or something. It wasn't. It had, there was things about it that weren't great, and other staff were leaving and stuff like that. But what I'm saying is, it wasn't a toxic school. It wasn't a really bad school. And unfortunately, that's the one I went into from there. On both, certainly one of those occasions, 100%, that's what happened. And the other one, mostly. So, I don't know what lesson there is to take from that. I think the lesson might be, like you said, Mike, earlier, is like, slow down, have a look around, have a think about it. Don't dive into anything. I was going to ask you a bit more on that, both of you, actually. And Chris, you could start on this, actually, in terms of, because I know Mike mentioned earlier as well about, like, take your time and almost like visit the school or get set. I hear so many times that, with one of those schools that I've mentioned, I visited it twice. Okay. Yeah. I did the interview. I met 2 or 3 of the senior members of staff one-to-one. Now, granted, I didn't see the school with kids in it. This particular school, the visits were when the kids weren't in the school and stuff like that, but I still had time and I still had opportunity. I read reports, I read, and that was a mistake. There was, all the stuff we say about checking things out, I would say that to anyone too, but is it like a waste of time? Is it just at the end of the day, like? And equally, on the other side of things, you could hear some bad stories from people about a school, and it could be that, I don't know, those few individuals were the problem. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
I think that's really interesting, because saying about visiting the school and not visiting it when the children are in, that's an absolute. It's essential for me. You've got to see it when the children are there.
Yeah.
Because you can walk around with
Mike,
teachers and senior leaders, can't you? And they
cheers
can
for that,
tell you
Mike.
anything
Just
at all.
text me that about a few years back. That would have been great. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Hindsight's 2020. Hindsight's 2020, isn't it? I remember walking around a school with a head teacher, looking at a school, and this school was really highly regarded. It was very successful. It had been a bit of a show school, a model school. I thought, posts come up here. I'll go and have a look. I wasn't in a position where I was desperate to move, but I went and had a look around, and when you're just immediately uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The head would walk around the school, and he was telling us things, and he would walk through doors that children were coming through, just through them. Didn't acknowledge the existence of the children, just through doors. The children did the same thing. They would just push past the adults.
Yeah.
And you just go, whoa, no way. I mean, I'm not into the big children should hold doors for adults thing. That doesn't feel right for me, because if you want them to do that, you have to hold the door open for them sometimes.
Yeah.
So that they get it modelled, and there was just nothing. He never spoke to a child. They didn't speak to him. We went into a classroom and had a look, and he stood inside the door with me and another person looking around and talked to us while the lesson was going on at full volume. Never spoke to the teacher. Never spoke to the children. Oh, excuse us, we're just coming in to have a little look. Not just full volume conversation in the corner of the classroom, and then walked out. And I just thought, yeah, no, no tar. You're all right.
The only thing, not the only thing, but like a problem with that is obviously if you're in a job, you can't get out. It's impossible to. That's why I guess, Tom, you probably could only see it because you can't get time out of work to go and look around the school, because you're hardly going to say to your head teacher, I'm looking to leave. Can I go and visit?
They've got to let you. They have to let you do that. If you want to go and look around a school, they are obliged to allow you to go during working hours. That's absolutely acceptable.
That is true.
Yeah, but I don't know how many people actually do that. That's the only thing. I guess I get that that's what they're supposed to do, but in reality, it doesn't often happen.
Well, I'll be honest. I didn't know that. I didn't know they were obligated to let you.
Yeah, they should. They should.
Go and.
I'm sure it's in one of the documents somewhere. I forget I've read it somewhere. But yeah, no, I think I'm sure it's whether it's a gentleman's agreement kind of thing, but I'm sure they are supposed to allow you to go and visit schools during your working time.
That is interesting. I genuinely.
If anyone wants to jump in and tell me I'm completely wrong there, I'll hold
No, we'll find out. Someone behind the scenes will find out. Nathan's in the background. He'll find out. Someone will. But I mean, it sounds believable. But I mean, to be fair, in the one I was telling you about, without going into the whys and whats, I couldn't do that. So it wasn't that I didn't want to. It was almost impossible for me to do that without going into like the whys. There's nothing sinister. I just couldn't. So yeah. So I mean, I guess in some context, maybe people are like, no, it's impossible for me to actually see it in action. The school. So, but no, I mean, what you're saying that I'm sure will resonate with a lot of listeners, and in terms of experiences of whether it be interview days or school visits and stuff. But you know what you can also do though, and again, I've done this: ignore red flags. Push the red flags down, because once you're set on a path, once you have an idea in your head, and maybe this is just me and my personality, to be fair, putting into this, but once I have this sort of dream or idea in my head, I stick to it. I'm stubborn with it. It's very hard for me to break that until I see something. It's almost like Doubting Thomas. I need to feel, the weapon inside me to know, this is wrecked, right? Otherwise, I just follow the dream. I just follow the path. But I think a lot of people are like that. I think once, you sort of get an idea in your head and you sort of ignore the red flags. They're there, but you just push them down because you don't want to see them. You're in denial, essentially.
Certainly can happen.
Yeah. Anyway,
I think it's
go on, Chris. Sorry.
It's sometimes useful to obviously if you know people who've worked there, or people who are working there, that's really, really helpful as well. But it is difficult because you can't, as teachers, often we fall into the trap of believing or taking on board the stuff that we really shouldn't believe, or be that worried about things like Ofsted inspections and the rest of it, and reports, and It's really quite it's tough. It's the same as being a parent. You've got to try and pick the best school, and the best way to do it is word of mouth and what local people say. So that's always the times where you used to look at reports and other stuff and data. It's just I've learned, it's taken me a very long time, but I've learned that's almost pointless.
Yeah. By the way, Nathan has looked this up. Apparently, it will be the decision of each school how it handles requests for a leave of absence for attending interviews during term time. You will need to check your school's policies and staff handbook for specific information. Staff absence and special leave policies will be useful to look at. So that's pretty ambiguous, isn't it? I guess.
So it's suitably vague, isn't it?
Yeah,
That's nice and vague.
yeah, definitely. Listen, I wanted to ask you another question. Both feel free to jump in here. Either of you, both of you. But do you think that moving schools, because you've both done a fair amount of moves, and so have I. In fact, I've probably done even more than you guys have, which is, yeah. Anyway, do you think that it's made you a better teacher? Do you think that if you'd have done a little less moving, there might have been more positive effects of that for you? You know, how do you see those moves, those sorts of semi-frequent moves that you've made?
I would say absolutely, for sure, it's made me a better teacher. People might say different, but I'm not saying if I'd have worked in 53 schools, I'd be
Yeah,
absolutely blinding. I'm just saying that I think by moving about a bit, I'm not saying people who've stayed in one school, because a friend of mine is exactly the same age as me, has only worked in the one school that I worked with her a few schools back, but it doesn't mean they're bad ultimately. But I think the variation, the difference in area, geography, that is, the ages, and the subjects that I've taught, I just think and I've been at the chalk face, classroom teacher, SLT. I've done loads of stuff. I think definitely, it's definitely made me a much better teacher. And in terms of the subjects that I taught, I'm a fantastic quiz team member. But that's but beyond that, beyond that, I don't know. But no, for sure, I would say it's definitely improved. It's improved me, but I don't know that I would have been any better with more moves, for sure.
Mike,
I think I'd mirror almost everything Chris has just said. I think seeing different types of school, different types of children, different types of area, different types of staff, different types of leadership, governance, all the little facets that come together. I think, yeah, it definitely makes you. I think it's made me a better teacher. I'll stop myself from saying it makes you a better teacher, like it's the right thing to do. But I think if you've done a few years in a few places, some longer term things, some shorter term things, I think when you find somewhere like I have, where I'm really comfortable now and I feel I'm doing a good job, issues arise and problems pop up, and sometimes you'll get a staff member go, I don't know how to deal with that, and you'll go, well, what you could do is, because I've seen this in different places, so you see different things, you pick up different tips and skills from different people, and then when little problems arise and little niggles come up and people need some advice or they just need some support in something, I find that I've got just this little bank of different things that I can do or say, or I can have that conversation with a parent in a slightly different way, or just little things that, yeah, you just pick up little tips and tricks and shortcuts and ways that just allow you to navigate situations perhaps a little bit more confidently than if you've never seen those sorts of circumstances elsewhere before. I think it's definitely made me a better teacher for it. And also, you make mistakes in different places. If you make mistakes in one place, and we all make mistakes, we all get stuff wrong, they can stick with you a little bit. Whereas if you've made a mistake previously and since moved on, you can go, right, hang on, you've been here before.
Yeah.
Don't do that, do this. I think it's all sorts of, it's just just a bank of experience that you build up in, like Chris was saying, teaching different ages, focusing on different subject leadership areas, or just different roles within a school in terms of where you are in a hierarchy of leadership. Just give you those little insights into how different staff members are reacting to things, how different teaching assistants might need guidance in certain ways, or how you can make suggestions to leadership about how another way of approaching something might be. So if you don't like something someone says, you're not just shrugging your shoulders. You might be able to say, is this an option? And I think it just frees you up to do those kinds of things, which I think could be really powerful.
I'm going to ask you. Go on, Chris. Go on.
I was just quickly going to say, I reckon what I found invaluable, especially having been senior or SLT, isn't that funny the way we talk about that? I was SLT I went back to being just a regular classroom teacher for a period of my career. I found that invaluable because I think a lot of senior leaders get classroom blind. I don't know if that's the right way of putting it. And also what's interesting, and I'm not that technologically advanced, but I saw a question from JBL on the. I just had a quick check talking about supply teaching. I think that might, because Mike, you did that as well. I think that might be even better, because you must see loads of stupid stuff and loads of great stuff. So you must.
I'm definitely going to err on the side of I've seen some absolutely stupid stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you could sort of say, well, that policy is a completely pointless waste of time. But I mean, I just personally, having been kind of vice principal almost, and then classroom teacher, it was eye opening. And you look at some people in making decisions, you go, you really don't know. It's a bit like some of the leaders and inspectors as well, and people offering advice on Twitter amongst things who've never really not been in a classroom either at all, or for like 15 years. It's I found that good. That was good for me.
I was going to ask you next, and I'm going to give you a minute to think about this, is the strategies you've developed to sort of integrate quickly into a new school culture or environment. So I'm going to let you sort of digest that and think about that just for 1 minute while I thank our wonderful sponsors on the show tonight one more time, which is John Catt Educational. If you haven't heard of them, then please check them out at johncattbookshop.com, and you can get 20% off any book you order through John Catt by using the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off any order. And my goodness me, if you're talking about a range of books, just visit their website to see what you can get there, johncattbookshop.com. Reading Solutions UK, I mentioned them earlier on in the show. They're an online reading development program and the home of Dreambox Reading Plus. I've tried their pilot for 4 weeks. It's amazing. So I would highly recommend, if you're interested in reading or you're interested in children developing their reading in a broad sense, then definitely check out the 4-week free pilot. You can get that by just searching Reading Solutions UK, find their website, and drop them a line about the 4-week free pilot. Big thanks to John Catt and Reading Solutions UK for supporting Teachers Talk Radio, the home of live education conversation. So, Chris or Mike, I will let you decide who goes first on this, but I wanted to ask you next about that idea of starting in a new place, which we've all done many, many times. What are the steps you would take or avoid taking when you start in a new school?
It is tough because the classic I found is I'm on the phone to a parent and I say my name, and then I think, Christ, where am I working? And you have to remember the school you're at. Not that I've worked in that many, but like you do forget. I don't know what's best. I suppose you have to engage with a few of the senior. When I say senior, I mean people who've been there a long while.
Experienced staff. It's that, isn't it? Those who've been in the building for a while.
Yeah, speak to them. Obviously, there'll be some cynicism. You'll get a load of that. And speak to a few people who've been there. The people who are in charge, of course, as well. But the thing is, especially being older, I say older rather than old. What I found just recently, and whether Mike you think the same, or whether you feel the same, Tom, is when you walk into a new school, there are people who just think they just look at you and assume you know everything. They go right, off you go, and you're not saying you get no help, but because you don't necessarily ask for help, people will just assume, and I think it's not my problem. That's their problem. They should be supporting you a bit better. So I don't know. I think talk a lot, ask, but I think equally the schools you move into should offer you a fair amount of support as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think getting to know people. I mean, it's very buzz phrase, isn't it, to build relationships, but it's kind of true. And I know that I've gone into places and forgotten that step, and suffered the consequences of it.
But are you talking as a leader or a teacher? Because that seems quite
in that
specific.
respect, as a leader, going in and sort of being not parachuted in, but that the job that I took was a class teacher, but due to some quite difficult circumstances, I ended up immediately taking on a leadership role, and I probably took myself a bit too seriously, in the sense that I didn't think about the situation was quite tragic. The person who was in role was off on long-term sick, and she had cancer, and sadly she passed away. So I then was asked to take on that role, and of course I was just facing constant barrage of, but you're not this person, and I kind of didn't respect that. I should have done, but I didn't, and that taught me a lot about leading people. That if you don't consider people properly, you're going to struggle in a situation. So I think I agree with Chris. You've got to get to know people. You've got to talk to them. You've got to find out what they know, find out the little backstories of families that you've got, and who your school community is made up of. Learn your school and learn your environment and learn your people, before you start trying to be someone.
Here's a
if people see you buying in and becoming part of the team and part of the group of staff, and all, you seeing that you're coming in and you're wanting to do the same things that they are, you're going to get accepted a lot more quickly and a lot more easily than if you kind of come in with I know this, and so therefore, because people don't necessarily respond to that well. So I think, I get to know people, talk to the children a lot as well, not just the ones that you're necessarily teaching, but other ones as well, because they'll teach you a huge amount about how a school works and who the go-to staff members are, who the people that the children find easy to talk to, and all of those sorts of things that you can build your picture of your school. I think it's about becoming part of something. And the more easily or more readily you can do that, the more easily and readily you'll be accepted into that group.
But also, just to throw in a sort of provocation here, is, so from my experience, it would be being a good teacher. So when you look at the teaching standards or any framework for teaching you want to look at, right, which will have very similar things on about planning and delivery and assessment and all the different things that, engagement, all the different things that make good teaching, right? You could be, if you were to take that broadly speaking into any context, you can teach well. If you can take all those frameworks and amalgamate them into some broad way of looking at things, you can teach well in almost all contexts. That's what I think. However, with leadership, yes, you can find leadership framework, but I do think it's much more. But again, this might be because I find leadership and management harder than teaching. So I'm probably bringing my own bias into that now by saying this. But I also believe that it's much easier to not think individually about a context as a leader. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say here. I'm trying to say that being a good teacher is being a good teacher, and it's much easier to be a good classroom teacher. I say easy, it's bloody not easy to be a teacher, full stop. But what I'm saying is, if you know how to be a good teacher, you can take that into another context, right? What I'm saying about leadership is that you could be a good leader in one context, and then you could do almost the same thing somewhere else, and it just falls apart. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just sort of throwing that idea out there.
I think that's
Well,
what comes from having a diverse group of humans, isn't it? If you've got the way in which you've been successful as a leader in school A worked because it worked with the group of adults that you were working with and leading. You take exactly the same skill set and exactly the same approach into school B. Those people aren't the same. They're coming with their own biases, they're coming with their own experiences, they're coming with their own beliefs about how they think they should be led or how they want to be led or how they are led well. If your successful leadership from previous experience doesn't match with that, then they're probably more likely to be resistant to it, and it might be more difficult for you to be a leader. But I take what you mean. If you have a good approach to teaching and learning as a class teacher, and you apply that to a new school, yeah, you're probably still going to be okay. You'll tweak your policies and different bits and pieces that are always going to be slightly different. But you like you say, doing teaching in the classroom well is pretty much the same wherever you
But
go.
also, I'm sure that's on a personal level. I don't have the same confidence as an educational leader as I do as a classroom teacher. So therefore, it comes with confidence as well, doesn't it? Because if you have confidence in yourself as a teacher, you feel right. You can parachute me in anywhere, and I'm going to have a real good go at this.
Mm.
But as a leader, when you don't have maybe that confidence or experience, I do think it's a lot more daunting, and it's a lot more trying to, and also it ties in with that whole thing of people thinking because you're a good teacher, you're a good leader, because you know how to teach, you know how to lead, because you know how to get on with kids in a school, you know how to get on with adults in a school, or because or vice versa, right? So all of those things I think tie into that. One thing I did want to ask you both, and I'll start with Chris on this, because I feel like Chris has gone with sort of my trajectory, which has been, I started off at a school and I did 5 years in my first school, got really established, really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was quite a challenging school, but I really felt good in that school. I felt settled in the school. I felt part of the school. I think when you reach that point where you feel part of something, it's hugely rewarding. It gives you a sense of security. It gives you a sense that, and again, I don't mean this in a way, you can't get too carried away with this, but it does give you a sense that what you're doing is important because you're part of something that, and everyone sees you as part of it. The kids see you as part of the furniture and everything else, right? And it's amazing when you get to that point, even in a school that's not perfect, even in a school where behaviour is a challenge, which it was in this one, right? But that was great, right? But as time's gone on, my career has evolved into different things, and obviously I've started doing different things outside the classroom as well. So I've been either part-time or I've been doing different styles of contracts in the last 4 years, let's say. The last one was permanent but part-time, 18 months. But actually, what I wanted to sort of ask was around whether, if you're in a school and you literally are hating it, quite soon after joining it, so you've been there for like 3 months, let's say, 3 to 6 months, you're hating it, right? Is life too short, and should you just ditch that school, or should you try and dig in for a period of time?
I would say you've got to give it a go. I would definitely say 3 months, just 3 to 6 months is probably not enough. But having worked in one school recently for 1 year and 7 months, I'm kind of a little bit hypocritical, I guess, because that was quite tough there, and I knew. But the thing is, I think sometimes where you're going isn't like it's going to be a short one, for want of a better way of putting it. That's why I can say that from experience is when I went to that school, I knew I wouldn't be there for very long, for a variety of reasons. I think that you do have to give it a little bit of time. I would say a minimum a year, But I've worked with some people who turned up at their school and after day one knew they needed to go, and in some places because of the situation at the school they went from, they went straight back to the school that they were at. But I do think you've got to give them a little bit more time. And just speaking about what we said a minute ago, I do think I can equate a lot of it to football management in terms of movement and people leaving and stuff like that. Because what I'm finding recently is head teachers bring people with them, frequently the people they get on with, and so there's a little bit like that. And I do think you might see a lot of staff turnover, and they might not see eye to eye in terms of leadership. So they bring the people that do see eye to eye with them, and then you've got to decide either to see eye to eye with them or go, effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I think I would say it kind of depends on what it is that makes you uncomfortable. Is how I would look at that. I agree. I think if you're in for sort of in September and by Christmas you're thinking I've got to get out, it would be, for me, it would be okay, but why do I feel like that? Is it lack of support? Is it something more sort of institutional around the management or the behaviour, or do you feel unsafe in the environment? If you feel unsafe, then you probably should leave, because that's different. But if you're just uncomfortable with expectation and teaching styles or teaching expectations, it's probably worth sticking it out a little bit longer. It's probably just different to what you've done before, so it makes you uncomfortable. So I think it would depend for me on what was my reason for feeling like I had to go so fast.
I think it can also be really tough when and this has happened to me, right? Where you might have worked in one or two schools, maybe even more than that, where you've got on extremely well with the student body. You've been somebody who they, as a collective group, has respected, as sort of, got a really, I just hate that word relationships. I just hate it. No, seriously, because everyone's like, it always comes back to relationships. Oh, for
No,
God's sake.
I agree. That's why I said before, it's such a buzzword to say it, but
Yeah, and it's starting to wind me up massively. But
yeah.
That's why I'm trying to use other words to describe what I mean, because it's very easy to say, oh, it's the relationships. What does that blooming well mean? How do you get there? What is it? What is that je ne sais quoi, right? But I'm saying that in a couple of schools, 1, 2, 3, whatever, you've had that, and then you move to another school where the kids hate you. I'm not being, the kids hate you. You haven't even done anything different. You could work in a school where the kids respond well to the things you're trying to do, to even to the negative things that you have to challenge them on or whatever. There's sort of an underlying sense of you're on the same level with them. It's working, right? Then you move to another school and it goes completely the other way. You do more or less the same things, but the person, I do believe, and I will stand by this, that student bodies and cohorts of students have different sort of broad, it's not to stereotype, right, but they have that broad sense of what they're like as a cohort, as a large cohort of kids. And that's not to say that you don't, of course you have individual kids within there with very different personalities and all the rest of it. I get that. But you do get that sort of that identity as a body, just those very broad sweep things that they do and respond to and work well with and all the rest. And I guess in the first few schools I worked in, I didn't really realize that. I didn't see that. I didn't think that really was a factor. Once I'd done a few, I realized, hang on a minute, that cohort of kids was very different to that cohort of kids, even though on paper, you probably wouldn't have seen huge differences. You may have seen, I think affluence has a role in there. I do. And I think for me, 10 schools plus that I've done, I can now sit here and I can say, yeah, that's the sort of, cohort I enjoy working with, or I have the best chance of success with, or I can connect with the best, and I have a good chance with that of getting to where, I want to be in terms of feeling settled in that community with those kids. So I don't know what I'm actually rambling on about here. I'm more narrating how difficult it is to start in a new place, how easy it is to sort of think that something's going to work exactly the way it's worked before, and then being shocked when it doesn't, or sitting there going, what the hell have I done wrong? When actually you haven't done anything wrong. You've literally done nothing wrong. In fact, you've probably done more right than you did in the last place. But the bottom line is, it's a different setting, and what you are, your personality, what you believe is good and what you believe works, it just doesn't work there. And that's not your fault. It just doesn't. And yeah, you know what? They might hate you. They might criticize you. They might, and actually you might not be as good at your job. In my situation, I was a worse teacher there because I felt insecure about the way things were going for me there. So I then became a worse teacher. I became a bit less patient. I became a bit more snappy. I became a bit more negative in my planning and in my preparation and in my engagements and all the rest of it, right? So yeah, I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there. Feel free to get involved in the conversation.
All I'd say is never drop your standards. I've in the current place I'm at. Initially, I was just like you were saying. They hated me, and it was just I couldn't get anywhere. I didn't understand what was going on, and I thought, well, perhaps I'm just a bit too harsh. Perhaps I'm just expecting too much. And I did consider, but thankfully I didn't do that, and I'm glad I'm in a much better place now. The classes are much better, but I considered it, even though I've been teaching 26, 27 years at the time. I did consider maybe perhaps I'm expecting too much, but you've just got to stick with it. That's what I found. But yeah, you're right. It's just time, really. It's just time.
Yeah.
Which goes back, doesn't it, to that? If you are unhappy, why? Is it because the things that you've always thought worked, like you said, Tom? These things have always worked for me, so why aren't they now?
Yeah.
So you become insecure in yourself. So
yeah.
is
And
it
then
because
you become worse at your
you
job.
need to do? Is it because you need to do something a little bit different, or is it the kid's fault? Do you know what I mean?
It's I
These
wouldn't
kids just don't
necessarily
respond to
say
me.
it's
You know
the
what I mean?
kid's fault. Yeah, no, because there were other teachers in that environment who, and I used to question and not. I don't need to their faces. I didn't used to go up and say, "How are you enjoying this, you freak?" I didn't used to do that.
And they look back and go, "Well, they always behave for me."
Well, no, but this is just it. You go in. There are teachers there who are actually enjoying this, and I'm sitting there going, how's this possible? But then, of course, you look at the contexts maybe of those teachers, or you look at the context of the school, you look at the context of the kids. I'll give you an example, right? And this is sort of more fetch theoretical, but let's imagine you have a cohort of students where the expectations on the students are very low. Okay, so they might be extremely affluent. They might be the expectations within the school are extremely low on them. So therefore, if you're a teacher in there who sort of, I'm not saying lots of these teachers exist, but let's say you're a teacher that says, well, I can just do this here. Okay. If I do this here, then it works and it's okay and I can be relatively happy. But if you're a teacher that expects a lot out of yourself and others and has a very high bar for what you want to get out of teaching, then a place like that can be a killer for you. And then suddenly you start feeling like you're the one who sort of has the problem, if you know what I mean.
I do, yeah.
I think I've explained that relatively well as an example, but that's where you might look in that school and go, they're really enjoying it, they're loving life, but they might be, but they're doing it on their own terms, and they're doing it on terms that you're not. They're doing it on different terms that they've agreed to and they've bought into with themselves and the students in the school, and you, for whatever reason, cannot buy in that way. So therefore, you're in conflict all the time. So the best option there was, and this is what I did. I just left, and I didn't really. I mean, don't get me wrong. I tried. It was a mad time, but I did ultimately just leave because I thought, no, you know what you're good at. I guess it makes a difference when you've got some sort of experience or track record behind you, because in a situation like that, it's much easier then to go, do you know what, life's too short, it's time to go somewhere else. And of course, you move on from there and you have another good experience and you go, you know what, that justifies what I was thinking. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This has turned into a massive therapy session. I don't know how much you guys are going to charge me for this. But
get to charge.
I did like there won't be a sofa big enough for this. It's been great, and I hope you've got some sort of meditation we can do at the end, just to sort of bring me back down to a level where I can sleep.
I'll go and find my wind chimes for you in a minute. Hold on, bear with me.
But I was gonna ask you both though. Do you think there's a stigma around teachers who do switch schools often? Do you think there's still a stigma about that? Or do you think there ever has been? Or do you think there still is?
I think there is actually, but you just need to be able to explain it. I think in a lot of industries, a friend of mine worked for Sainsbury's actually for 23 years, and since then, in the sort of 10 years since, he's had a handful of jobs, and people will look at that and think, might think less of you. But I think in teachers, they'll often look at where you've been, and they'll want to know why you keep switching. I suppose that could be the same in any industry, but as long as you've got a proper explanation and story, I think it's fine.
Yeah,
I'd agree. I don't know. I'm sort of trying to sort of think about staff and teachers that I've worked with, and I have worked with a lot of staff who have been in schools for a long time, and I'm the one that comes and goes. So I don't know whether there's a stigma or not.
I think we all are, aren't we?
I
think we all are. All three of us are.
So no, I don't know.
I have. I'll be honest. I haven't. But I do wonder. One thing I do wonder is, all of us three, okay, started in a school where we did a good few years. Yeah, a lot of teachers starting now, they're doing training for a year, and then they're going international straight away, and then they might flip. They might flip year after year. Now, if I'd have done that at the very start of my career, without doing those first 2 schools over 10 years, say 3 schools over 10 years, would I have felt different? You know what I'm saying? It's is there a stigma? Probably yes, a little bit. When you imagine, like in the private sector world, someone moves on to get a pay rise, and then they move on a year later to get another pay rise in another company, no one bats an eyelid.
No, I think you're right, Tom, and I think a lot of us. I don't know how many of us have had the same. I'm very similar. It sounds like I'm very similar to you. That I worked in a very difficult school, first 10 years, and really, really tough. But the kids were brilliant. Really difficult place, but that's been a fantastic grounding for me, and everything's been a breeze since then.
Yeah.
I say that with a pinch of salt, but I mean, in terms of behaviour-wise, I laugh at some people when they tell me how poor behaviour is or has been, or when I go back to the late 90s where I worked, it's almost hilarious. I wish I could send people. It doesn't exist anymore. It's a different school now, but I wish I could send people back. Have a look at what
that's an interesting one that I think that comes from, again, the fact that when you've worked in different schools and then you go somewhere and someone sort of goes, "Oh, behaviour here is awful," and you go, "No, it really isn't. These kids are absolutely lovely."
Yeah, definitely. I've had that 100%. In I'm thinking of one particular one that I worked in, which was fantastic as well. Actually, it was another really good one. But yeah, I'd moved there from 2 schools, where one after the other, where in fact, and I can throw in my training year into that. I'd worked in 4 schools that were tough in a behaviour sense. And then I'd gone to this school, and honestly, I remember just going, "Oh my God, this is so lovely." Oh my, the first few months I was going, "Oh, this is," kids saying thanks, and kids saying, "Oh," it's just, and kids, just, you do a good lesson, they'll say thanks at the end, or they're very nice to you as a human being, right? I wasn't used to that. I was like, it's like, what are you doing? What are you trying to do here? But actually, after a while, I was like, no, that's actually just what they're like. Initially, I thought that was because the school there had trained and scripted them into that, if that makes sense. I thought, like a school that sort of says, we've done this and this is the way they are, but actually they're not really like that. And as soon as they get out of the gates, they're not like that. No, these kids were like that because they were like that, right? And I was like, oh my God, this is like some utopia. It's amazing. And then there's someone saying, this is terrible and this happens every lesson and da da da. And I'm going, that's sort of normal within reason. And also, these kids are so nice that, you could tell them to not do something and they would, I don't know. It's an interesting one without going into too much more detail.
Need to protect the innocent at all times.
I love these shows. Yeah, we love it. I always follow up with something like that. Do you think that how do teaching communities value long-term stability over the diverse experience that come with moving schools? So do you think that schools in general say this person's been here for 10, 15, 20 years, so therefore in some ways we value that more than a Mike Watson or a Chris who comes in and has had all these different diverse experiences in different schools?
Ooh,
I don't know, because obviously you bring new ideas. You got lots of experience. I think that one of the reasons why I got the job I've got now is I've been through a lot of stuff, and been through a very similar experience to the one I'm in at the moment in terms of the school and its redevelopment. So I think you may well be judged, and I've seen some of the comments online. You may well be judged, and people might say, "Well, you flit around too much," but I guess it depends on who you are, and they might not take a chance on you because you've moved around too much. I really don't know, but I think good heads would be able to see, or good leaders would be able to see past that. Personally,
at the risk of probably sounding a little bit callous, I think as a teacher in any school, you're always as valuable as you are effective. So if you've been there 10, 15 years and you're still really effective and you're embracing the changes over time and still being effective and still getting the results and still achieving things well, then you're valuable. You are valued. I think if you come in and you've been in a school for 2 years or 1 year, your first year, and you're effective and you're doing all the things that you're supposed to do and the results are going in the direction that they're supposed to, then you are valuable. If that's not the case, it doesn't matter whether you've been there 3 months or 15 years. You're it's that old chestnut, isn't it, of you're always replaceable. So yes,
sure.
you could have huge value to your school, you could have huge experience in your school, you've done great things and you've achieved things well, and then you move on or you retire or you leave and everyone's, oh, it's so awfully sad you're leaving, you've been a fantastic servant to this school. Tomorrow there's somebody in your classroom. So I think if you're successful, and I think if you're doing the right things and if you're moving things in the right direction and you're working on improving your school either from the classroom or from a leadership perspective, of course you have value, and that value is going to be respected and recognized, hopefully. But the moment that changes, your value can disappear very, very quickly. And that's like all of us have said at some point, somebody new's come in and gone, Ash, I don't like the way you do it. Immediately, any value that you had, on August the 31st is gone on September the 2nd.
You see, I haven't actually had that. I haven't had that experience. I haven't had it from the perspective of I've already been there and someone's come in and been like that. You two have both. I haven't ever had that, which is weird.
I've certainly had that.
Yeah. Loads of people have had that. yeah, that might be like the only bullet I've dodged in my career. But anyway, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to both of you. It's been brilliant. Just so many good points. Yeah, really good therapy session for me, of course. But yeah, just generally really good. So thanks so much, Mike and Chris, for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Good. And just to end with, again, thanking John Katz Educational and Reading Solutions UK for sponsoring our show tonight. A massive thanks to everybody who's listened along, who's been dropping in and out. I know there's a few people still here now, so thank you very much to everybody who has listened. This, of course, will be available as a podcast as well a little later on for anybody who wants to listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You might want to host with us if you've listened back this far. So if you do, please get in touch. We've got some spaces available for new hosts. Join the hive mind of Teachers Talk Radio and get involved in the conversation. It's been great, and big thanks as well to Nath, who's behind the scenes adminning as always. And I'll be back next Monday night when I'll be talking about mobile phones in schools, and we are going to have a bit of a debate around that, and I've got two really fascinating guests who I can't wait to reveal soon, who are going to be sort of sharing their views on mobile phones and all that sort of stuff, digital detoxes in schools and what they're doing in Northern Ireland and all that sort of stuff. That's next Monday night with me. So if you're interested, please pop along to that. And I'll speak to you all very, very soon. Cheers, everyone, and good night.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.